Good evening. Welcome to the community library. Thanks for being here. My name is Allie Weplow, and I'm the media and digital librarian here at the library. I am so pleased to welcome you all in person and online to the John A. and Carol O. Moran Lecture Hall for this program with the Sun Valley Music Festival, a conversation with violinist Jennifer Koh. We at the Community Library are always thrilled to collaborate with the Sun Valley Music Festival, and that's because we, both organizations, are passionate about the power of books, of music, of art to elevate and engage us, bringing people together in new ways. I want to begin as a librarian with a book recommendation for Music is History. It's a new book available for checkout here. It's also on CD at the library. Music is History is by the artist Questlove, you may know. He is the 5-time Grammy Award-winning drummer for the hip-hop band The Roots. He's also a producer of the cast recording of Broadway's Hamilton and the musical director for The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. I know, quite a resume, right? In the book, Questlove ties landmark music singles to landmarks in history. About mixtapes, he writes this: I don't know if I thought of mixtapes as history when I first started making them, but that's exactly what they are. Anthologies that demonstrated how I both respected the past and understood the present. Some songs worked perfectly on any tape. Did that mean that they communicated some idea that worked in any context, in any time, under any circumstances? Were they cultural skeleton keys? And those are just the kind of questions we ponder with the Sun Valley Music Festival, a landmark of our local culture whose programming connects us to human history, past and present. I am so excited to hear this conversation between Alasdair Neal and Jennifer Koh. Now, to introduce them both, I will turn things over to the Executive Director of the Sun Valley Music Festival, Derek Dean.
Thank you, Allie, and thank you also to Jenny Emery Davidson and the staff of the Community Library. We treasure our partnership and our mutual commitment to bringing the arts to the Wood River Valley. On the surface, Jenny Koh would appear to be your traditional child prodigy. She started studying the violin at age 3, Suzuki method. At age 11, she made her debut with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. I watched the YouTube video this afternoon. At age 17, she won the Tchaikovsky International Competition in Moscow. And then she did something unusual. She enrolled in Oberlin College in Ohio and majored in English. And I think this is one of the reasons that Jenny is not odd. Now, there are not many performers who can perform at her level, but most of them are a little bit weird. And I think it's a consequence, a natural byproduct of spending 10 hours a day all alone in a practice room for the 10 or 20 most formative years of your life. But Jenny is a liberal arts graduate. She's a little bit different. And at this point, I'm going to have to come clean because Jenny Emery Davidson is sitting out here, and she's going to make me tell you that I also graduated from a liberal arts college in the Midwest, along with my friend Jenny. But one of the nice things about the liberal arts education is it encourages you to seek connections between things that are disparate. And this is a central theme to Jenny's work. And one of those areas where she finds connection is between the old and the new. So in 2011, she launched a project called Bach and Beyond, in which she performed Bach's sonatas and partitas for solo violin and paired them with works of contemporary artists, including several that were composed expressly for her. And those performances fill up 3 of her 18 albums. In 2015, she launched a series of recitals called Bridge to Beethoven, in which she similarly performed the 10 violin sonatas and paired them with works of 20th century and contemporary composers, including one piece by Vijay Iyer, who joins us this week, that was written for her. And when we asked her to curate this program, it was immediately obvious that she was going to bridge the old to the new. And so while we haven't published the program, you will hear works spanning from the early 1700s to at least 2020, and perhaps Thursday, because we expect Vijay may do some improvisation. So you may hear something for the very first time. New music is also a major theme in Jenny's work. Just 2 weeks ago, she played the world premiere of Missy Mazzoli's Violin Concerto with the National Symphony Orchestra. And she did it in front of the composer. You can see the photos. Can you imagine the pressure? So you're handed a score. There's no YouTube video. There's no CD. There's no bootleg copy of somebody else's performance. It is entirely on your shoulders to bring what is written to life as music. And the composer is sitting right there, no doubt eagerly anticipating glowing reviews and a lifetime of future performances for their beautiful violin concerto. So it takes a certain skill, a certain mindset, and a certain courage to take this on. Now consider that Jenny has done this 100 times. She has performed the world premiere of over 100 pieces that were written expressly for her. 39 of those works appear on her most recent album, Alone Together, which was released in August and also nominated for a Grammy. And one of them was written by Vijay. And I'm so looking forward to the concerts this week. Vijay and Jenny are going to play together. I don't know what they're going to play or whether they're going to make it up on the spot, but I know it's going to be entertaining. I hope you can attend our concerts. And now, please join me in welcoming the Sun Valley Music Festival's music director, Alasdair Neal, and Jennifer Koh.
Have to turn it on.
How about that? Good evening. All right, much better. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you, and good evening, Jenny. It's lovely to welcome you back to Sun Valley, this time in the winter for the first time.
Thank you.
I can't remember when you were here last in the summer, but it's probably around 10 years ago. Does that add up? Was it a little sooner?
No, we're so young,
We
Alasdair.
were,
It was
weren't
like
we?
last year.
Right. Our hair was definitely different colors back there, but it's so wonderful to have you here this week and just to have the chance to talk with you a little bit about about your life in music, which Derek just gave a wonderful overview of, and it is worth pointing out that one of the things that I just love about you is how you forged this in a sort of determined and determined way this unusual path for yourself. And so I guess my first question is, was this always your intent when you look back at your 18-year-old or your 19 or 20-year-old self when you were at Curtis, for instance, and you were you were heading in a certain path? Was this what you would imagine for yourself, or did it unfold more organically?
I come from a family of not musicians. And I think I didn't really know if it was possible to make a career in music. And that was just not something that was familiar. And I didn't necessarily have models within my family, at least. So I was incredible, and I'm still incredibly grateful to the mentors I had, starting with my very first violin teacher, Mrs. Davis. When I was 3 years old, she was my Suzuki teacher. I'm still in touch with her. And she really encouraged my parents to take me to the next teacher. And she told them I had some talent. And after that, so I think out of respect to my mentors, I worked. I think they believed in me before I believed in myself. So, for example, Felix Gallimere took me to Marlborough Music Festival, which has a long kind of storied history with really great musicians. And my teacher was also Jamie Laredo. So when you asked me, was this really clear? I think what was really clear from the beginning was that I knew that I was so fortunate and so lucky to have come across these incredibly generous human beings and musicians. And I would not be here right now if it was not for them. And I think as a result of that, I always knew that it would be something that I had to karmically give back in the future. How it would necessarily happen, I wasn't sure. And then, even learning more about their lives. Felix Gallimere, he's passed away now, but he was in the Vienna Philharmonic. He was one of 11 Jews, 7 of which were killed. But somebody who saved his life was one of my favorite violinists in the world, Bronislaw Huberman. And he's just so creative in his music making. It's just mind-blowing. But aside from that, he made the effort to save Felix's lives and as many lives of Jewish musicians as he could in Europe. And I don't want to go off on a tangent, but the reason I'm also here is because there was a change in immigration policy in 1965, which lifted restrictions of people of color. Of course, in the 1930s, Jews were considered to not be European, Western European, so all of the refugee boats were turned back. So Huberman arranged for Felix to go to Palestine, and he was one of the founding members. At that time, it was called Palestinian Symphony or something, and now it's the Israel Philharmonic. So Huberman made the effort, took the time, took the money to save Felix's life. But it was more than that, because Felix changed the landscape of music making in America. There is not a single orchestra or a single string quartet, a single chamber music group. Even in our rehearsal today, we were talking about the first time I played Mendelssohn Octet. Is that a really bad secret that I said that? That's going to be in the weekend?
No. We actually, the Mendelssohn Octet, we actually gave out as a teaser, so it's okay.
Oh,
it's not
great.
a spoiler alert. That will form the third act of the concert, in which Jenny will be joined by 7 of our own musicians.
Yes, so Eric, I guess, studied with David Sawyer, who was at Marlborough, who worked a lot with Felix. So even like today, and the first time I played the octet was with David Sawyer. So yes, Huberman saved somebody's life and made that effort, but I don't know that he realized that his actions would change the landscape of playing and music making in the United States.
Right.
And as a result of all of that, and knowing all of that, and because Felix was one of my mentors, I realized that we're all participants in history, that every action we take today changes the course of history. And because of my mentors, and because of being able to witness also their generosity and the importance of that, it kind of made, I guess, my own mission in life really clear.
That's beautiful. Well, it adds up to the idea that of paying it forward. Really, that seems to be central to your mission, and that's so that you've surrounded yourself with this extraordinary extended family of composers and other co-creators. How do you go about that process of, I mean, at a certain point, there must be, the engine has enough, it's propelling itself, but still you must be getting a lot of input, and who would I like to work with? I mean, do you have a selection process of any sort, or does it just happen organically?
I do a lot of research online, also because I really advocate for female composers, non-binary, and composers of color. A lot of times they're not in traditional venues, especially when they're younger. So I'll go, I mean, this is pre-pandemic, but I remembered one time I went to a performance, and I think I was like one of 3 people in the audience, but that's where I heard Nina Young's music for the first time. And she's now writing violin concerto. That's the lead commissioner is Philadelphia Orchestra and LA Chamber Orchestra. But that was like, I don't know, 8 years ago. With Missy that Alasdair mentioned, she's now first woman to be commissioned by the Metropolitan Opera ever.
It's about time, wouldn't you say?
But I first commissioned her over 10 years ago. So a lot of these composers, I do a lot of research. Even Vijay, I commissioned him like years before he got the MacArthur. So one of the things I feel grateful for is I've been able to witness so much talent and to be able to feel connected to these artists. And then I remembered when, for example, like with Missy, I heard her opera Breaking the Waves and in New York, and I just started crying during the performance because I could hear like that she had just jumped up a level in her composition, right? And just being able to witness that kind of growth and evolution, and the work she put into developing that, right? It's not like it just magically appears. And I was just kind of overcome because I was so proud of her. You know, and you really love the people that you work with. You feel connected to them in a way that's, I think, really unique. I feel that way with you, Alasdair. We've been working together for so many years, even though it was only 1 year.
Yeah.
Because we're both 20.
That's right. 20, no, let's not, 22, right?
Yeah.
It's the day of the 22s today.
But yeah, it's a kind of connection when you feel that connection. It's something that just is, there's nothing like it. And it's kind of a profound lifelong thing, I think.
I like that. I'm more aware of those things as I'm getting older as well. That we recognize them more keenly and treasure them more as a result.
Yes,
I think.
for sure. Really cherish it.
I want to read a quote that you did in connection with this one of your many projects, the Bridge to Beethoven. Actually, there's a couple of quotes, but this one I want to start with. It stuck with me. You said, I wanted to create a project that explores diversity in a compelling way where people can engage with different cultural voices in a musical conversation. This project, Bridge to Beethoven, is about including a wide range of voices that takes all of us on a journey that illustrates the evolving nature of classical music. Would you like to expand on that a little bit, either with particularly with regard to the Beethoven project or other projects?
Yeah, I was like, I think I must have written that a really long time ago because I don't remember writing that. I mean, I think what is so kind of interesting to me is the fact that music and art is living, right? And especially with music, it's like, you know, you make a sound and it's gone in less than a millisecond. So kind of creating these kind of calcified figures of, okay, this was a great musician, and they're just like this big statue over there, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas when they were alive, you know, they had all of the same insecurities, all of the same money problems. You see Beethoven writing letters constantly about not having enough money.
Bach too.
Yeah, and Bach wasn't really considered great in his day. He was considered like kind of like not very good, not fashionable in his composition.
Well, particularly after he died, that he was just like so last season, you know, because after the high Baroque, which is Bach and Handel, really at the apex of that movement, it gave way to the Rococo, and Bach's sons.
His son was considered really,
right. But by that stage, it was like very retro and just like too many notes sort of thing. But at the time they were, as you say, they were real live musicians with real live problems.
Yeah, and real human beings. And it's the same, and going through the same experiences that we have today, the same human experiences that we go through today. And so the fact that it's really a living art form, and it's a conversation with the past. But also, like, maybe it's because I was an English major. You don't just read, like, I don't know, Jane Eyre or something, and only think, okay, we're only going to think about it within that time frame, right? We have totally new perspectives on it. The way even whatever, like marriage and the dynamics of relationships, the role of women in society, like all of that's changed, right? So the way we view it and read these older pieces is totally different. And, you know, for me, it's when people have said to me, oh, I heard this premiere of a new music piece. I really just don't like new music. And oftentimes I'm like, well, there were quite a few movies I didn't like that came out last year, but that doesn't mean necessarily that I just don't like any movies that were made after 1950, right? And so I think if we go into, so part of the reason I've commissioned so much, I think as well, is because they're so different, you know, and even great directors like, I don't know, Scorsese, there are better movies and there, you know, it's not like everything's just at this level all the time, but it's really interesting to see them evolving. I always find it actually really fascinating, especially for directors, to see their first films, because it's like they've been thinking about it for like 10 years and they finally have this opportunity. And then they put it all in their first film. But it's beautiful, like with Missy, for example, just seeing how she's evolved as an artist. Yeah, I totally went off on a tangent. I have no idea what the question was.
It's okay. Some of you may remember in the 2020 festival the Missy Mazzoli's Vespers, the one that we did in Grace Cathedral with the red dress and the train, and that made a big impression. And that's a piece you've done many times, haven't you?
That's on I released it on a CD as well, I think. Yeah.
Let's talk about a little bit more of the influence that all of your work with contemporary composers. I've never asked you this, even just when we were hanging out having coffee. But do you find that you're looking at Bach, Bach is an obvious example because of the pairing, and even with Beethoven, but even something like Mendelssohn, I don't know, it was, let's say, a standard repertoire concerto, which you continue to do. How much of your immersion in all of these projects informs the way that you look at the music in the past?
Well, in terms of Beethoven, right, I think nowadays we think, oh, it's so pretty, so familiar. But actually, in his day, he was a total revolutionary. And what's interesting is he took all these, now, okay, we're familiar with it, and so we're like, oh, yeah, it's moving to this chord. But at the time, it was completely how he kind of made harmonic decisions and even sometimes rhythmic things, anyhow, was totally unlike anything that had come before, and which also meant like a lot of people hated it at the time. But I wanted to, it's kind of when it gets put into a context, hopefully then with the new works, it's understood how revolutionary those older works were. So hopefully not only does the way I play it hopefully change, but also the way all of us listen to it, so that we can hear those things that made those older composers so unique as well.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for us to understand that Beethoven was new music, and like radical new music. I still find, I have to say, the late quartets are shockingly modern.
Yeah.
And I mean, a piece like the Grosse Fuge is, I think Stravinsky said it was, like really out there. And you just can't believe this was written in 1825 or 6 or whatever. And then Bach, by contrast, who was not so much revolutionary, but it's almost like, Bach is for me, the hardest composer to talk about. I just find myself completely tongue-tied. So tell us a little bit more about how you view Bach through this lens. Has it changed? Let me ask it a different way. How has your relationship with Bach's music changed over the years, and has it done so in part because of the context that you place him in sometimes with the other repertoire?
Well, I was just thinking because you mentioned the Grosse Fuge by Beethoven. And the thing is, nobody cared about Bach's music except for musicians, right? And so they kept his music, his sheet music, his manuscripts. So he was basically not being performed at all in public. And then you see magically Mozart starts writing fugues. It's because his friend showed him manuscripts by Bach,
Yep.
right? And it was only carried through musicians, right? So again, we're kind of thinking about this, how people are participants in history and really changing the course of history. And so it might have not been in his lifetime. He wasn't recognized. He probably felt, or it's pretty well known that he felt pretty dejected at the end of his life because he wasn't considered, a great or good even composer or whatever. So we can kind of see again how that course can change history, and that's also one of the reasons I commission so much, because maybe this one piece will turn out to inspire another composer, let's say 25 years from now, 50 years from now. And so hopefully you're changing the course of classical music, and also in terms of inclusivity, also in terms of making sure that women, who are 51% of the population, are also heard, and that they're in charge of their own narrative, right? It's not like most opera where every female character is like a prostitute or gets murdered or has tuberculosis and dies.
Problem
a lot of them
children
get
one way
murdered,
or another, right?
right?
Yeah.
So they actually can have their own narrative. I remember Kaya Sariaho, her opera, L'amour de Loin.
Oh, I love that.
I know.
Yeah.
And then finally, it's the guy that dies. The guy dies of a broken heart. I'm like, yes, finally, it's not the woman.
Yeah, opera's got a bit of catch up to do in that regard. It's true, and it's like many other art forms is dealing with these issues long overdue.
And so when we talk about, everybody, even when I was young, everybody was like, oh, classical music's dying. And I think we have to think about, are we actually listening to and reflecting our own society that we live in, our own cities, our own towns? Are we hearing the voices of everybody, their stories, their narrative of their lives, instead of somebody else placing that narrative upon them through the view of somebody else? Are we actually hearing their own voices? And their own stories. And so part of it is also hoping to change what classical music looks like in the future, because of course it started in Europe. Of course it started at a time when, I don't know, I think women were having babies and then dying in childbirth constantly. So that's changed,
What you're doing seems like giving agency to people and to create to help to create their own destinies. Talk a little bit more about, if you would, about the creative process, and obviously there's more than one way of exploring a relationship with a composer. But when you're working with somebody, do you have an approach yourself, or does it really depend on the composer? And how much input do you have?
So I started this project called New American Concerto Project, in which Missy's concerto was part of that. Vijay's violin concerto was part of it. And it was just to reflect what America is today, who we are today, and what does our country sound like, essentially. And there's kind of a multiplicity of voices. And I'm just thinking about Missy because I just premiered her concerto. I think what's really essential, and it's true in our relationship as well, is that there's a lot of mutual trust and a lot of mutual respect in each other. So when we have conversations about things, it's really clear that we both want the best for this piece, for the life of the piece. So there's actually a lot of back and forth. And because, I've been playing the violin for a while, and I've been doing concertos for a long time, and playing a lot of them. I can basically see on a score when I just see the printed music, like, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? Are there going to be issues? And sometimes it's about asking, well, what are you actually looking to do? Is this about bringing out the melodic content and the basses, or is it things like that? And if that's so, then maybe it should be doubled, or things like that. And so there's a great deal of trust that goes into it.
Do you find yourself occasionally saying to a composer, yeah, that's not going to work?
Of course, of course. And they trust, I mean, hopefully they trust you because they know you've been doing it for a long time. They also know they know that I've been premiering a lot of things. And I have a lot of experience. And there's some things, actually, I remember with Missy, I was like, okay, so with the tempo conversions, I was like, you please give it to me, or let me have control over it, right? Because oftentimes, which just means like, let me kind of either do the transition into the new tempo, and then, like sometimes it'll be a division, like the 3 previous eighth notes equal like the new quarter note. I don't know if that's too much technical stuff. And so that there's a way to give an indication, because if somebody is just looking at a piece for the first time and it's like quarter equals 100, it's really hard to tell what that is, because I would have practiced it so much, and oftentimes it's new for an orchestra, especially if it's like a premiere with that specific orchestra and stuff like that.
That's true, because other people that will in succeeding generations will be looking at this music won't necessarily have the same sort of line, the direct intravenous thing that you have with the composer. That the conversations that happen with you and Missy need to find their way into the score.
Yeah. And it's just fun to go back and forth, and to have different ideas. We actually, I was lucky enough to be chosen as creative partner with Juilliard for this year. And so we had a chance to workshop it with the student orchestra there. And there were just so many changes. And one of the things that some of the students told me that they found fascinating is we were just changing things on the spot and just experimenting. Oh, let's try this 2 octaves higher. Wait, let's try this as harmonics. Wait, let's try this as ponticello. Oh, let's see what happens if we do this flautando. So
that's so inspiring, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're not afraid to make a quote unquote mistake, right?
No, and the thing is, she's not. She's so open and trusted. Like she just wants it to be a good piece, right? So it's not like all this other stuff gets in the way. She's like, oh yeah, let's try it. And then of course she makes the final decision, but there's no like, but this is like a gift from God. How can you possibly change it? Which can happen. It can happen. It does happen.
Yeah.
It has happened for sure.
Let's talk about Alone Together, because I think it's such an extraordinary project, and we'll be hearing a little about that this week to give it a little bit more of the game away. But it also encapsulates what you were just saying earlier about of responding to the moment, and this is very much a creation of the moment, and it embodies your spirit of generosity, and I would say kind of widening the stage metaphorically, if you know what I'm saying. And so tell us really how it got started, and as much as you want to tell about it.
Well, I think for everybody in the performing arts, it was, I think I had like maybe the last concert was like on a Tuesday, and I flew back on home like on a Wednesday, and then like every half hour, like every single concert canceled. And of course I panicked, right? Because that's everything we do. And so of course and it's like all my income. I mean, that's like it's my job. And so of course I panicked, and I remembered I shouldn't there's probably an online audience, so I'm slightly embarrassed, but I'll just pretend it's only you guys. So I totally panicked, and I went to the grocery store that night, and like there was nothing in that grocery store except for like these two little sad apples that actually had been on the floor. And they were like, thrown kind of in the floor. And I was so freaked out that, please don't tell other people, this will be our secret.
Doesn't go anywhere except out of this room and on the internet where it is currently.
Because, and then everybody was like, oh my God, you have to like clean everything, wash your hands for 20 seconds, like wipe down everything that you touch. And, and so I soaked these two apples in Lysol for half an hour, and then I ate it.
Ah, that's good eating.
I totally ate them, and they totally tasted like Lysol. So maybe I poisoned myself, but I remember the next morning waking up and I was like, I remembered being like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? I need to go to sleep because like clearly I'm like, I've lost it. But then I remembered waking up the next morning thinking, you know what? I'm actually lucky because most of my work has been postponed. It's not been completely canceled. And thinking back also on, after I left school, it's tough. Making that transition into being a professional musician. And then I thought, oh my God. And on top of that, a pandemic. I mean, normally it's hard, but then on top of that, a pandemic. And I was thinking a lot of the younger generation, their things were just canceling. So it might have been their first string quartet that was ever performed, their first orchestra piece that would have ever been performed. And just what they could have learned, much less the exposure, much less like the opportunities were just all gone. And because I'm also freelance, I totally understood that, you just cobble together income, especially at that time period. And unlike what I normally do, I knew it was really time was of the essence, especially for young freelance musicians. So, I relied on my colleagues who were incredibly generous, like Vijay, Missy, Nina. Well, there's like 20 of them. So, yeah. And they recommended younger freelance musicians. But, a lot of it was thinking, also, I think as musicians, we always have to think about how it ends, right? You can't just start the piece, and if that makes sense, we always need to know where is this piece going. And so maybe because of that, I knew that there would be an end to the pandemic. And I remembered thinking, what kind of person, when I look back, what kind of person do I want to have been? Would I have wanted to be somebody, because of course I was scared, that would have just been scared in a ball, in the corner? Would I just be somebody that was only worried about my own career? Or would I look back and actually know that I helped other people? And that was important to me. And that's how we were able to get this project together. And I'm still really grateful to my board because everybody, it was so chaotic, right? It was like shelter in place orders, people had family, like it was just, and I'm so grateful to them. We did our first premieres 2 weeks after the shelter in place order for New York. So we managed to pass that. Yeah, we passed that project in about a week and a half. And
so
started
the pieces
moving.
themselves, so just, what's the unifying principle behind, if there is one? What's...
Well, the unifying principle was that they were, or the parameters were that they were micro commissions, kind of the standard rate for composition is $1,000 per minute, right? And because I had to make a decision, do you help fewer composers with more money, or do you help more composers with less money? And at that point, I decided it's more important to help as many people as possible. So that was kind of the overlying, in the beginning. But then what ended up happening, or what I realize now, especially when I listen back to the pieces or when I'm playing them, is that it's actually a musical archive of that time. some of the earliest pieces that came in, they're just all sirens. I remember the first concert I kind of did in public, which was like 20 people outdoors at Lincoln Center, like 20 people, like outside, like one a pod over there, like the next person over there. And somebody mentioned to me, oh, I heard sirens, but it didn't interrupt the music. And I was like, because all of the pitch, they're like, because there's sirens in the music. And so Vijay's piece was one of the earlier pieces. It was in the second week. But one of the pieces that I'll be playing, you do hear those sirens. And it was the first piece to be completed that was sent to me. And it is only sirens. And,
Wow.
but, I think what all of us kind of went through at that time, emotionally, I think maybe we all went through it at different times, but it's all in these works, kind of isolation, loneliness, despair, fear, love, all of those things, intimacy. All of those things are hope. They're all in these works. And so looking back, I didn't think about it at the time, but it's really an archive, a musical archive of that time. And then we were really lucky, or Library of Congress asked to archive all of it, including all of the emails and the initial sketches. Also, I made these interviews. I used to complain about, I was always like, I am so not technical. I can't even make a video for anything. And then suddenly I was like, So I did all these interview things and learned how to use Final Cut Pro. It's bad. You can find it online. It's not like I spliced well. But in any case, so all of that, just how people were feeling, what were they thinking when they wrote the pieces? What was their experience? And so the Library of Congress told me they didn't have anything left. They didn't have anything cultural and artistic that artists had done in the 1918 pandemic. And so one of the things they were trying to do was to create an archive of what artists had done during this pandemic. So unfortunately, if there's another one ever in the future, let's hope it's never going to happen, but so that people will be able to look back and see what this generation did.
Well, the other thing that's probably worth pointing out is the longest of these pieces is 5 minutes, right? Or
they tended to get longer as we went
did they?
along.
Because I was looking in some of the tracks. I thought but they're generally very, very short. Some as short as a minute.
Some are 30 seconds,
Yeah,
and especially the ones in the beginning. What some of the composers told me in the beginning was that was all they could manage, and then another really talented composer, Angelica Negron. Her piece. It's called Cooper and Emma. And New York was so, I still feel traumatized, but it was so terrible in March. And in fact, of 2020, in fact, I think any person that lived in New York at that time is still traumatized because it was just multiple sirens nonstop for weeks. And it was a good day if less than 900 people died that day. And when you heard those sirens, you just knew that they were dying. There was just no. So her piece was that she basically had the covers over her head and she was watching these Instagram videos of these two dogs, Cooper and Emma, playing with balloons. And so that's what her piece is. So basically it's how we all handled different things. I don't know, I talked about her piece. But it's so bubbly and so wonderful. It's so lovely.
So the whole nature of the project is just such a wonderful encapsulation of the power of music to express all of these incredibly diverse emotional states.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't belong just to Beethoven or those guys or Mozart, who certainly did those things very well. But this creates a sort of tapestry of sound in a way.
Yeah. But if we think about it, it's not proven fact, but one of the things we do know about the sonatas and partitas for violin of Bach, the solo sonatas and partitas, is that they weren't perform publicly. So it's almost like a private journal of his life. He wrote it over 17 years, and you see how he just changes and evolves as a composer. And again, this isn't proven, but his wife died, and he didn't know, because back then, there was like you go to some other city for, a month, and it takes you like 5 days to like move 20 kilometers or something. And when he returned, she was already buried. And so they believe that the Chaconne was written as a kind of memorial to her. So all of these, so human, all human beings reacting, expressing their very human experiences through music. And I think that's what's amazing about it. And that kind of communal experience, I don't know how you felt for your first performance back. I felt incredibly uncomfortable.
My first performance back with an audience, as opposed to doing recording things, was here.
Oh, wow.
And it was, I remember the first rehearsal that we had, the orchestra. It was our festival chamber orchestra week, and we started with Haydn 104. And none of us had played at all together for 2 years, and most of us hadn't played since March of 2020. And I thought, I wonder how it's going to feel. Like, how's that first chord going to, because it has to be like, dum, bum, ba, bum, everybody plays together. And it was just like, bang! Like everybody was breathing together. And I thought it was incredibly powerful. And that performance that evening was just, we were practically levitating off the stage. It was a really, really wonderful feeling.
Oh, wow. I cried the first time because I don't know, I thought like for some reason it felt like I would never perform again. And then that first time I played, I actually I was breaking down because I was so overwhelmed. Yeah. And then the first time, and so I was only doing outdoor stuff or else the video stuff. And then the first time I played indoors with like an audience actually close to me was in July of last year, of 21. Yep. And I just remembered feeling so overwhelmed by feeling the energy of people. And I played solo box, so I thought, oh, it's going to be like in my apartment. Or I guess I don't know. I guess that was what I had become so used to. And I remember just realizing everything, timing, like you feel people in the room and how people are breathing, and it changes the timing. It changes everything. And I was overwhelmed because I hadn't felt that for so long. And when people are like, really far from you outside, you don't feel it as much. You don't hear other people as much. You don't, it's not as intimate, I guess. And I was just completely overwhelmed.
I would say that for me, the total effect of the 3.5 weeks of music making last summer was the most intense and sustained, joyful musical experience of my life. This is always still the happiest orchestra on the planet, but there was a new level last summer that just brought it to that unforgettable place.
Do you find that everybody is just so much more appreciative? I've found that not only in myself, but everybody, every musician, the kind of joy in music making has been totally rediscovered in a way.
Definitely, and a gratitude. I think a life without gratitude is not a life worth living, and that message has been brought back to me, I think, during this time, and it's certainly something that rings in your life as well, as you were going through a lot of tough times yourself in the pandemic. The fact that you turned to other people and offered them the chance of creative outlet, I think, just speaks to your extraordinary generosity. It's really, really amazing. And,
Also, I mean, I want to say that the composers, the mentor composers, were incredibly generous because they donated their works and really thought through and chose younger composers that they knew needed help, but they also believed in. So there's a kind of, it was beautiful because I saw that kind of care in the community that we were worried about the younger generation and about the future of classical music, and that we were able to come together. I found it very moving.
I want to talk, maybe this will be our last main area of conversation before we turn it over for some questions, but we've touched upon this perhaps obliquely at various points through the interview, but it's clear that your commitment to, as I say, in effect, metaphorically broadening the stage is incredibly important, that diverse voices need to be part of the present and the future, and those that have been excluded on the basis of race and color and sexual orientation, whatever, in the past, it's vital that they be part of the conversation. And you've spoken very eloquently in the New York Times and in public about your experiences, and some of them really quite shocking. And I remember you and I had a conversation afterwards, just in private, the two of us, that really floored me. And so, with that in mind, I wanted to just read another of your quotes. Actually, what may have happened a number of years ago, but it's another beautiful one, and you'll see why I'm wanting to bring it up. And I just ask you to comment a little further on it. So you said, the traditions, plural, of classical music belong to all of us. And the future is about the energy that people from different places can bring to this music. What can actually make it more interesting and revitalize the musical performing tradition is adding more people. And so in this moment where a gigantic reassessment of our art form and our place in society is taking place, I wondered where are we and where are we going, and how's it going so far, and what are taking the temperature, what's your, if you were able to make predictions, what's the direction? Is it going in the right direction at the right speed?
Well, I feel like we were kind of talking about gratitude, and I feel like a lot of that is also thinking about service in a way, right? How are we serving each other like fellow artists? How do we actually serve our communities? How do we serve the art form, right? And I think the only way that we'll actually be able to have classical music be relevant and continue to be vital in society is if it reflects society. So yeah, in terms of the future, I think that that's really, really important, because I worry about the future, because I love this art form, right? And I feel like, or I believe that that's the key to the future of classical music. But I also think that what we do as musicians, or what I hope for, is that I imagine the future I want to live in, and then I take every step I can to build that future. And so I think that that's also why I see this importance in commissioning, the importance in folding in even more people into classical music, not only in audiences, but also in terms of storytelling, in terms of people and models on stage, and in terms of music makers, like in terms of composers. So that's my kind of mission. That's kind of, and the belief that I have. I'm sure other people have different things, but at least for me, I feel like that's my mission in life. Yeah.
That's a beautiful note to end our conversation on, and let's first of all give Jenny a great round of applause. Thank you so much. Now, I know all of you. You are a smart bunch of people out there, as always, and I'm sure that that a lot of what Jenny's been talking about over the last 45 minutes or so has given you some ideas. And so I'd be delighted to relay any questions that you might have for her. Tony.
Jenny, when it comes to curating a program like this week, you know a little bit about the audience, the age and backgrounds and so forth. How do you decide what balance of old and new to mix in to maximize what you want to accomplish?
I'm just going to relay the question for those that are listening online. In curating the festival this week, how are you balancing old and new together?
Oh, well, I think first of all, it was getting to know this community. There were a lot of conversations with Alasdair and about all of you guys, and I was also grateful. I've been asked to, of course, I've created all these projects, and that's one of the reasons I started a nonprofit, Arco Collaborative, is because I wanted to have that space to create these things and make them come to life. And so I felt so grateful, actually, that you asked me to curate. And it just felt like a wonderful opportunity to be able to be part of your community here. I know for a short while, but Alasdair has known you for so many years, and he was able to kind of tell me about all of you guys, what you love, what's important to you, the things you would enjoy, some of the things that, I could experiment with. So it really came out of that kind of discussion, and I really trusted Alasdair as well. So it's a mixture of old and new, and again, it's kind of creating this thread to the past. It has some experiences of what we all went through, I think, in the pandemic. And so it's kind of a mixture of all of those things. The piece that I'm doing with, am I allowed to talk about the pieces, or is it?
Sure. We'll just keep it amongst ourselves, right? And the internet.
I feel like everybody's going to think I'm insane with the Lysol apples, but
We're not going to
so
forget
usually,
that one. That's for sure.
usually I don't talk. I haven't really spoken about it, except my friends knew, and they were just like, "Oh my God, Jenny." Yeah, so I mean, so I think the programs create a thread to the past and also the present. And again, talking about this kind of future that we want to live in, the piece I'm doing with Vijay, he wrote for both of us, and it's called The Diamond, and it's based on this Buddhist sutra. And so each movement is based on one line of the sutra. And it is about trying to reach kind of more, I guess, a new reborn place, perhaps is the right way to put it. So, yeah.
Great. I'm looking forward to that.
What in your reading as an undergraduate and beyond informs your music performance?
Do you want to relay the question? Yeah, you can.
Oh, so he asked, wait, what did I read that informed? So I think one of the things, when you're a major in literature, I remembered one of our exercises was James Joyce's The Dead, was that we had to use 5 different forms of critical theory to analyze the text. So everything from post-structuralist to historical to, I don't know, Marxist to blah, blah, blah. And so that realization that there are so many lenses to view something that was obviously written in the past was a way to just approach music in general, I think. And then also it was recognizing James Joyce was never in his lifetime. I mean, he knew. He actually said that he was writing for the future. It wasn't for his time. Mahler said that too.
Yes, that's right. My time will come.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I guess it's also along that idea that it's important to do the work that you believe in, even if it's not necessarily in your lifetime, right? So even when we talk about things like social justice or about building a better world, it's not necessarily something we're going to see the fruits of. And when I talk with like my students and stuff, and they're like, and unfortunately sometimes, well, one of my students had a really bad experience. And then I got really upset and wrote this article in the New York Times.
That's where that came from. It was a great article. It really was.
It was a little scary. I'd never written an article or published an article, and for that to be in the New York Times for the first time, and then also to have it be about race was scary. But I remembered part of it. She was like, "Oh, what should I have said? Like, what should I have done?" I'm like, maybe, and I was like, "It wasn't on you. It was on the adults to have interjected. It wasn't on a 13-year-old's shoulders, you know." But then they at some point, I told them, you know, I've fought and I'll continue, of course, to fight, but it's going to be up to you guys to continue the fight in the future, and they'll build that better world, you know. But you know, we'll do as much as we can. But I don't know if we'll see, you know, everything in our lifetime. It's definitely, hopefully, we'll get better. At least it's important to say things, I think. And for me, writing that article, I mean, at some point I was like, well, if I don't feel like I have collateral now to write this, I'm never gonna feel like I have enough. And frankly, after those women were murdered, in March, actually, of last year, much less, there was an Asian American woman. They were both Korean American, actually, and around my age. There was one that was murdered maybe last week. And then 2 weeks before that, somebody my age was pushed into the subway and died. She was pushed in the tracks. And I don't know, I was just like, well, if I don't say something, like, who's going to say something? Like, somebody has to say something. Nobody's saying anything. And I was like, maybe I should say something. So it just got to a point where I was like, this is enough. It's enough. I was like, I can't just stay silent anymore. It's enough.
I'm so glad you did. And it's worth checking it out online. It's a wonderfully bracing and honest article that you just that you wrote. So thank you for that, and as well as these sort of lovely thoughts for the future that you're that you're involved in planting seeds. And you're right that we reached a certain stage in our lives that we don't know how much longer we've got, but investing in the future is the key, and that's a beautiful thing to end on. So I'm so delighted that you're here this week, Jenny. It's really just, and I can't wait to see you making chamber music with our wonderful musicians, as well as to bring Vijay up as well, and the whole program that you've curated. It's been wonderful. Plan it with you, and I know that all of you will be there at one of the performances this week. In the meantime, let's put it again, hands together again for Jennifer Koh.
Wow. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and the only thing I miss is the fact I won't get to play with you, Alasdair.
I'm sorry?
The only thing I'm missing is that I don't get a chance to make music with you, because you're the best.
Oh, you're
He's
so
the
sweet.
best.
Well, we'll do it
love
again.
you.
We will
Yeah,
do it again.
yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.